Hey, what's up guys? In this video, I'm going to be explaining why you may not be happy with your landscape photography and some solutions on how you can actually change that, take photos you love, right after this. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome into the video. On this channel, we talk landscape photography. So if you're into landscape photography at all, consider subscribing to this channel. Now in this video specifically, I really wanted to talk about what a lot of photographers experience through their photographic journey, and that's getting into a rut or not liking your landscape photos as much as you think you should or as much as you want to. And some of the ways that you can resolve those issues. So I've really come down to know like 5 reasons why you probably don't like your landscape photographs. And I want to jump right into the list. Number 1 is that you're probably focused too much on gear. A lot of landscape photographers, either beginners or even people who have been landscape photographers for a long time, whether that's a hobby or a pro, can kind of rely a little bit too much on gear. It's really important for landscape photographers especially to really think about what gear is to them, how you're using gear, how you rely on your gear. Gear is really important to landscape photography, especially when you choose like lens, how you're gonna compose this shot, what you're gonna do for the features within this shot, how you're gonna choose your lens, how that fits, whether you're full frame or crop sensor. There's so many things that go into buying your gear, but if you're only using your gear to be a better photographer and not really know the whole way of like using it or composing a good shot, then you're only relying on your gear to make you a better photographer. It's kind of like this, like if you've never shot a photo before and you buy some really expensive camera like Sony a7R III or a big like full frame mirrorless camera like that, and you just buy it right off the bat, you're probably not going to see much of an improvement from like a point and shoot camera because you're not studying composition tips, you're not studying what within a frame can create a good image. So you really need to think about how you're thinking about your gear and stop relying on it so much, because your gear is not going to make you a better photographer. Your work and your understanding of photography and the elements within your image are really going to work together to make you a better photographer, not the gear you purchase. So don't always focus on buying the most expensive stuff and thinking that that money that you spend is going to make you a better photographer. Number 2 reason you may be getting a little bit down on yourself as a landscape photographer is you're comparing yourself to the wrong people. You're probably comparing yourself to the professional photographers that you're following on Instagram or social media and thinking, well, why can't I take photos like that? Professional photographers are probably the wrong people you need to be comparing yourself with. They really post those photographs for you to be inspired, for you to learn from, different things like that. Maybe not to compare your own work to theirs. Maybe help you develop a different style based on the images that they've shot. But comparisons of where you are as a photographer, wherever that is along the line and progression of creativity, comparing yourself to somebody who's at the end point of where you want to be, that's good to aspire to, but to compare your images to that is probably going to make you a little bit frustrated because you aren't there yet and you haven't taken the steps to get to that point yet. So it's really important to kind of keep that in perspective, not to compare yourself to them, but to look to them as inspiration, look to them as an endpoint of a photographic journey, and also really compare yourself to people who are on your same level. Like talk to them, compare your images to what they're doing, different post-processing techniques that they're doing. All those things go into comparisons of landscape photography and how you can learn from a community of landscape photographers. Number 3 reason you may not be loving your landscape photographs so much is because flat out not shooting enough can really result in not being inspired enough about your own images, not shooting enough to really grasp your creative concept of what landscape photography is, whether that's trying new techniques or trying to develop your own creative style in landscape photography. My kind of solution to all of this is to find areas that are in a 3-hour radius of where you live. Once you do that, you can really hone in on what those places are and use those as places that you get to go shoot. Not all of us can travel to like Namibia or New Zealand or Patagonia or Iceland. Really pick out a few spots that you can realistically get to and make it a point to go shoot those places more. I guarantee that you will see a growth in your photography if you just get out and shoot more, try to develop more creative perspective, more creative compositions in the same areas over and over. I've recently developed myself a 365 project that gets me out shooting every single day, just because I felt like I wasn't shooting enough images and I was spending a lot of time like doing other things, answering emails, all those things that go into running a photography business, but actually getting out and shooting, I was feeling less inspired because I wasn't doing it enough. I highly recommend getting out and shooting places more often than not, and actually making a schedule to almost force yourself to get out and shoot more than you are right now. Number 4 reason, and it could kind of go along with number 1, is you're not investing into composition. You may be relying too much on gear like we already talked about, but investing in composition is really what's going to make you a better photographer. And it's kind of boring because we all love the gear, we all love the cameras, the lenses that are coming out right now. But investing in the composition is going to make your photography so much better, honestly. And that's not really necessarily investing costs or money into composition, but investing time, investing energy, investing educational resources. How are you consuming things that are going to make you a better photographer? Right now I have a playlist showing up on the screen of photographic tips you can take out in the field with you. Maybe that's a way you can take these tips and invest time in composition. But I would rather see photographers more often than not invest time and resources in composition and field work and going out in the field and taking these images, practicing techniques, rather than spending on gear or other ways of trying to be a better photographer. I highly recommend, and I can almost guarantee that once you start investing in composition work, start investing in creative vision, then your photographs will go like from a 3 to probably an 8 immediately once you take that step in investment on your own photography through composition and field work through techniques. And lastly, guys, number 5 reason that you may not be loving your photography right now is because you're not really working with the weather. So many photographers really have a problem with planning purposes and not being able to stay flexible around those plans. Guys, I've had a plan to visit the Smokies because peak fall foliage season was so much later in the year this year, and I really had to change those plans recently because a storm just went through and wiped out all of the leaves off of the trees. I have to adapt. What's another way that I can get into some areas, maybe lower elevations, other locations around that same area that are lower in elevation that didn't get clipped out by the storm? Maybe I need to go to those places in early hours of the day based on what the sun is going to do during that day. If it's not cloudy, how am I going to get out to those locations and shoot them? Because sunlight's really going to damage those photos because it gets a lot of highlights and distracting light down on the water. How do I avoid that? How do I adapt to the weather that's being presented to me? If it's raining or it's been really wet, maybe I hit some waterfalls. If it's sunny, maybe I go out and shoot the edges of the day at sunrise and sunset to really get that sunlight warm glow on the mountains. Maybe if the storm's rolling through, I go out right before that storm gets there, right after, to feature that storm. All these things factor in to landscape photography and working the weather instead of having this plan like, hey, I'm gonna go shoot this at midday because that's what I thought I would do on this day. Instead of doing that, you can still go to that location, but based on the weather that's being presented to you, work with that weather. Don't just go out and shoot like bright blue skies. Really look at the weather that's being presented to you and be like, hey, how do I take interesting light during these weather conditions? Do I need to change my plans? Do I need to change a location? Really factor those things into your landscape photography fieldwork. Guys, I know that if you're in a rut right now, like so many photographers tend to get into, myself included, that these tips are gonna help you break out of that and take more photographs that you're going to start to love over and over. So if you're not loving your images right now, take these 5 tips into practice and implement them into your photography. If you like this video or you found it useful at all, hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to this channel if you want more tips, or continuing watching is always an option too. I'm gonna include that playlist that I already talked about, these photographic tips you can take out into the field with you and try out new things. I'm gonna include that on the screen right now so you can click over to those and really see what you can implement into your own photography.